Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. They warned us, and here we are, just 3 hours away from Trump's deadline for Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, or, quote, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again, end quote. And while Pakistani officials are proposing a 2-week delay to that deadline, Donald Trump's existential threat to Iran is already putting the U.S. military in the unprecedented position of either obeying the commander-in-chief as he publicly vows to commit what would amount to war crimes against the civilian population, or engage in a widespread act of defiance of illegal orders. While Trump's threats might have been intended to force the Iranians to come to the table and make a deal, it so far appears to have had the opposite effect. As U.S. and Israel bombed roads and bridges throughout the day in Iran in an effort to force Iran to open the strait, the New York Times reports this, quote, Iranians formed human chains along bridges and around power plants around the country. Videos and photographs posted by state and local media showed, in effect, daring the United States and Israel to kill civilians in order to hit those sites. It was unclear whether the gatherings were arranged by the government, which has organized rallies in its support throughout the war. In the last half hour, Donald Trump called those human chains, quote, totally illegal, and said, quote, they're not allowed to do that. And as Trump's attempts to bring the Iranians to the negotiating table by force fail, experts are warning that the leadership of the U.S. military could be facing legal jeopardy. One of those experts telling the Washington Post this, quote, I'm concerned that the president's bombast is putting the operational commanders in a very difficult position. That's according to Jeffrey Korn, who served as a top law of war expert at the U.S. Army in Iraq in 2004 and 2005, who adds this, quote, they know that you cannot just draw a circle around the country and say every element of the electrical grid is now a lawful target. It's a concern echoed by a frequent guest on this program, former Lieutenant General Mark Hertling.
I'm sure there's a lot of military commanders right now, a lot of senior officers who are saying to themselves, I can't obey an unlawful order. I can't do things that I know are absolutely wrong. But they also feel like they have to provide support for their soldiers who don't just get to quit. It's really causing some dynamics within those who are thinking soldiers saying, how do I continue to serve my Constitution and live by the rules that are in law and still conduct these kind of actions which are horribly immoral and illegal?
Trump's existential threat to Iran and the untenable position he is putting our nation's military in is where we begin the hour with retired U.S. Army Brigadier General Steve Anderson. With me at the table for the hour, Puck News senior political columnist and national affairs analyst John Heilman. General, I start with you and just want to hear everything, how you see this moment.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for having me. I know General Hertling well. He was in my company at West Point 50 years ago, hard to believe, and he's spot on target. I mean, we are really putting our military leadership in a bind. And the video that Senator Kelly and others produced a couple of months ago is really prescient, because we've come to a moment in which it looks like they may be asked to conduct illegal orders, to obey illegal orders, because that's what committing a war crime is. I mean, there's an entire protocol associated with evaluating appropriate targets within the theater, and they always include a legal review. And if it's something that has to do with a civilian target, it's more important than ever to have a legal review. And of course, then it's got to be signed off by the appropriate commander. And the more difficult, the more impact that the target may have, the higher in rank would be the approving authority. This has to happen for every single target. So for the president to say we're going to totally annihilate the company or the entire country is absolutely ludicrous. We're setting ourselves up for failure. I remember, and I'm sure any student of history would as well, the Nuremberg trials. I wasn't born yet, but I certainly know the impact where we had 12 senior leaders in the German military that were hung. They were executed because they committed war crimes. Their crime at the time was to obey the orders of those appointed over them, including, of course, Adolf Hitler. What I would like to not see is a situation down the road in which our soldiers face legal ramifications, some kind of a military tribunal for the military orders that they may be conducting, that are simply illegal. Those, a tribunal stood up by The Hague or some other international court. Donald Trump may very well try to pardon them, but they're not going to be able to withstand legal action from an international standpoint. And that's what really, really worries me at this time.
And I think the careful point you're trying to make is that hiding under an order from Trump to Hegseth is not a defense if the laws of war are violated. And I want to bring it back to that video that so rattled Trump's cage. He tried to prosecute the 6 members of Congress, and that they didn't get a single member of a grand jury to agree to indict them. He tried to use the Pentagon's justice system to punish Senator Mark Kelly. That didn't work either. So let me read you what Senator Slotkin tweeted today. Quote, "I know that our service members up and down the chain of command know that their duty and the law to refuse illegal orders. Even as the commander-in-chief tells the world otherwise, it is moments like these that are why we made the video to service members last year. And I hope and believe our troops, especially those in command, will have the moral clarity to push back if they are given clearly illegal orders." What is she saying?
What she's saying is that our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a person. Okay, and that means that they will obey legal orders and disobey illegal orders. Committing a war crime to target a water desalination plant or a power grid that includes a hospital, that would be a war crime, an illegal order. And she's saying, and they very rightfully reminded us all of the importance of understanding that every soldier, sailor, airman, Marines has the right and the obligation to disobey illegal orders.
Let me read you one more reaction today to Trump's post this morning. Quote, "Threatening to eliminate a civilization is comparable to genocide. That is illegal, immoral, and should not be in the vocabulary of an American president. The ominous sentiment he's suggesting would be a criminal act. Unfortunately, he's put our professional military officers in a very difficult situation. They cannot carry out an illegal order. Our allies are no longer just skeptical. They're shocked and appalled. And they can't tolerate even the suggestion, let alone the behavior he's talking about. And I think he's not focused on realistically ending this conflict as he seems to have lost control. In fact, he's become as fanatical as the regime leaders in Tehran. So now you seem to have 2 groups of fanatic leaders battling each other. That's not a good outcome for the world or for peace." What do you make of the things that we can't walk back from, that we all are, as Americans, represented by his threat of genocide and his conduct on the world stage?
Well, it is so sorry to see the degradation to the American culture and the way of life that Donald Trump is executing every day. We've always been the beacon on the hill, the bright, shining light, the example of what a good democracy and what good people can do for the world. And we're just doing the opposite. We're acting like a predatory bully. Iran is looking like the rational actor right now. Even though they're being led by a bunch of religious fanatics, they look almost reasonable and sane in comparison to our own president, who's embarrassing us every day, who's dragging this country down. America's stock has never been lower than it is right now. We have no allies. The NATO allies are shaking their heads. I mean, I think Charles Manson has a higher approval rating in Denmark than does Donald Trump. The GCC, they're saying, hey, wait a minute, we put all these bases over here in the Gulf to protect us, and now they're being targeted. Japan, Korea, the insults to Australia and others, we are just going downhill fast. And it's all because of Donald Trump. And it's really because the GOP, the cowardice of the GOP has allowed this to happen. Where is the outrage? Where are they complaining? Where is anybody calling for the 25th Amendment to be enacted? Because that really should happen. This man has absolutely lost it. And the Republican Party is letting down this nation, and they're disobeying their own oath of office by not standing up and exercising the rights as the Congress of the United States.